captured in State's Exhibit 93?
The first one listed is 09L, and just for reference purposes, the L would stand for a line level. So this would be a line level complaint that we would receive, or actually they could also be precinct initiated line levels that we'll send out for referral to be investigated by the immediate supervisor of the employee. And we'll basically send it out or refer it out and then log it out and then log it back in again once the investigation is done by the precinct supervisors. So at any rate, back to the list, the first one is 09L0878, which was a line level sent out on or about December 2nd of 09, alleging professional image profanity being used by Robert Olsen.
And what was the result of that investigation?
The database printout shows that there was a sustained violation, and if I reference the actual package, then I'm seeing where his precinct command staff, after their investigation, they recommended a written counseling for professional image.
Okay.
So sustained a violation for professional image, and yes, they sustained a violation and recommended written counseling for that infraction.
Okay, and we'll go into that in a second. Just for the court's benefit, when you say sustained, are there different outcomes that can happen as a result of an investigation?
Yes.
And what are they, and can you explain what they mean?
Sure. There's exonerated, which means that the incident did occur, but it did not violate policy. There is not sustained, which would indicate that there was not enough evidence to determine or to prove or disprove whether or not a violation of policy occurred. There's sustained, which says that a violation did occur, or unfounded, which is the incident either did not happen or did not involve the named employee or an employee of the department at all. And then there's also withdrawn if somebody just basically rescinds a complaint.
And that was the first one. Can you go on and tell us about the other remaining ones on that State's Exhibit 93?
Okay. I didn't review it for content. However, as I was pulling them, I noticed that there was the same complainant on 10L1020 and L1024, and they're basically stating the same date. One shows to have been recorded as a conduct unbecoming, and the other one was recorded as a professional image. Like I say, this was back in 2010. I probably was just in the unit, just arrived in the unit at that time, so I don't know exactly how they were logged or if it was just a duplicate of some kind. But
and what was the result of that one?
That complaint was exonerated.
Okay. And can you go on to the next one?
The next one was 11L, again a line level 1187, which was a professional image complaint that was not sustained.
Okay. And when you say not sustained, is that when you said before there was a situation where you just couldn't determine one way or the other whether it happened?
Correct. Not enough evidence to prove or disprove the allegation.
Okay. And what was the last one?
And the last one is 12L, again a line level, and 0122, and that was a duty to read, understand, and comply, which is essentially if there are violations or there are policies that do not carry a schedule of penalties, and so they would fall under a duty to read, understand, and comply with orders. Essentially, I don't want to say a catch-all, but it's essentially a catch-all. If there's a particular policy that doesn't necessarily carry a schedule of penalties, it would fall into that category, and that one shows to be a sustained violation.
Now, there's a screen in front of you, and I have State's Exhibit 94 up here. And page 2. If you could go ahead and just read into the record where it says brief synopsis of complaint. Can you see that on the screen?
I can.
And if you could go ahead and just read that into the record, please.
It says Ms. Lewis alleges that on December 2nd, 2009, at approximately 0100 hours, Officer Olson performed a traffic stop on her at Corporate Boulevard near Buford Highway. She stated that Officer Olson began shouting at her over the phone or over the police unit's public address system. Being fearful, Ms. Lewis stated that she called 911 and requested another unit to respond. Ms. Lewis stated that when Officer Olson approached her vehicle, she advised him that she had requested an additional officer to respond and was currently speaking with a 911 operator. She stated that Officer Olson responded to her by saying, quote, "I am the fucking police," end quote. Ms. Lewis was issued citation number 240-79432 and 433.
Okay. And you said this one was sustained, is that correct?
I believe so, yes, that was.
Now, this particular one came in because the woman who's mentioned there, Ms. Lewis, actually made a complaint against Officer Olson, is that right?
I believe so. I haven't seen how her complaint appears but.
And so I'll just show you from State's Exhibit 93. You see there, this is line level complaint from Ms. Mercedes Lewis.
Correct.
94.
I'm sorry, 94, thank you, Judge. And so, question, or I'm going to actually just ask you to look at and read this is, what are we looking at here? Whose statement is this in this package from State's Exhibit 94?
It shows to be a statement from Robert Olsen to Sergeant Coffin.
And if you would, this last paragraph that begins with "I approached," can you see that okay?
I can.
If you would go ahead and read that, please.
I approached the vehicle and found the driver identified as Ms. Mercedes Lewis on her cell phone. I asked her to please hang up so that I could speak to her. I requested her driver's license. She did not comply with either request and advised she was on the line with the police. I advised her that I was the police. I don't know if there's an "and" under the marker. And for her to hang up the phone and give me her driver's license. I sincerely believe that I had not said the F word and had absolutely no had absolutely no recollection of such an utterance. I was not aware that I had spoken it until I listened to the audio of the call from 2340 hours on December 16th, 2009. Based on what I heard in the audio, I admit it appears I did in fact say the F word. I understand the gravity of this violation. However, this conduct is not typical of me and will not be repeated.
And continuing in State's Exhibit 94, I'm going to show you what is the heading on the top of this page.
It's a memo to Lieutenant Wilson from Sergeant Coffin, and the subject was the complaint on Officer Olson.
Okay. I'm going to turn to the second page of that memo in State's Exhibit 94 and to the last paragraph. Do you need me to make that bigger, or can you see it
I
okay?
think it's fine.
Okay, go ahead and read that, please.
A copy of the 911 call made by Ms. Lewis was requested and received from communications. Upon listening to the tape, one can hear Ms. Lewis yelling at the operator and being unsure of her location. When Officer Olson walks up and makes contact with Ms. Lewis, he asks for her driver's license. She tells Officer Olson, "I am on the phone." She tells Officer Olson, "I am on the phone with the police." You can hear Officer Olson say in the background, "I am the police." She continues speaking with the operator, who is advising her to get the badge number, or to get his badge number. Officer Olson again asks for her license. She tells him again that she is talking to the police. In the background, you can hear Officer Olson say, quote, "I am the fucking police," end quote. I played the tape for Officer Olson to hear, and after he heard it, I pointed out that in his written statement, he states that he did not use profanity at the time, or at all during the stop. I told him I could hear him say, quote, "I am the fucking police," end quote. He stated that he did not recall saying that, and that he would write a statement that he sincerely did not believe that he said that. I also asked him if he recalls Miss Lewis asking for his badge number and him telling her it didn't matter, or quote unquote, it did not matter. He stated he did, but at the time she was asking, he was attempting to gain control of the situation, and that he did not know who Miss Lewis was on the phone with.
And then the last sentence there, what does it say?
This is Officer Olson's first offense of professional image, and in accordance with the schedule of penalties, I recommend a written counseling.
State's Exhibit 95. Third page. What is the synopsis of this complaint?
And this is, which case number is this, do we know?
This is 241-49674. Incident date July 6, 2010. And if you could just go ahead and read the synopsis of the complaint right here.
All right. It says, Mr. Simmons alleged that Officer Olson was rude and refused to explain why he pulled him over after performing a traffic stop on his vehicle. Mr. Simmons also alleged that Officer Olson refused to answer his questions and threatened to take him to jail.
And this was one of the ones that was exonerated, is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. State's Exhibit 96, which is complaint 243-46739. Sure. State's Exhibit 96, page 2. And it's in the case number or citation number at the top.
Thank you.
And then, Sergeant Bradbury, if you would, I'm going to make it bigger for you if you need it. Or can you see that?
No, I can see it.
Okay. If you would just read the nature of the complaint there.
Okay. On June 11th, 2011 at 14:55 hours, Officer Olson conducted a traffic stop on a Chevy Silverado at Peachtree Road and Town Boulevard for failing to obey a traffic control device. Officer Olson approached the vehicle and advised the driver that he was stopped for running a red light. The complainant, who was the passenger in the vehicle, Miss Catherine Mitchell, stated that Officer Olson was rude and would not listen to what the driver had to say, and the way he spoke to him was uncalled for.
I'm just going to hand this to you. I think it'll be easier. The complaint that came in from Ms. Mitchell, can you just go ahead and read that, please?
And this is an email from the email address attributed to Ms. Mitchell to Sergeant Bonds, who would have been one of the other sergeants in the unit at the time. And it says, "Thank you for taking the time to direct me in my complaint. Saturday, June 11th, my husband, myself, and my husband's brother and his wife were looking forward to spending some time in Atlanta when a traffic light went from yellow to red very suddenly. If my husband had braked very suddenly, the vehicle behind us would have rear-ended us. When my husband saw the lights of the control car, I'm assuming she means patrol car, of the patrol car, he pulled over, and as soon as the officer walked up to the truck, he started shouting at him and saying that he was blatant and would not even listen to what my husband was saying. All four of us are in our 50s, have been law-abiding citizens, and have had stable jobs for over 30 years each, and have him talk to us like that was uncalled for, and I would seriously suggest enrolling him in some kind of people skills course or anger management course, because the way he acted, I am sure this is a common occurrence for him. My husband and I both support the police officers fund every year, but I hate to think this is the kind of officer it goes to, and whatever happened to a verbal warning, in such hard times as of late, a warning would have gone a long way with people who are never in trouble. And it's signed sincerely, Kathy Mitchell, and her contact information.
Thank you. Now, in this particular case, the result, according to this, was not sustained. However, I want you to, if you could, go ahead. Can you see that okay at the very bottom there where it says action taken?
I can.
If you can read that, please, into the record.
It says, I spoke with Ms. Mitchell and advised her of the findings of the investigation and the actions that I recommended for Officer Olson. Although this complaint is found not sustained, I recommend that Officer Olson take a sensitivity training class or a class on dealing with the public, because this is the second incident where Officer Olson has received a complaint about his demeanor in dealing with the public. And that's signed from what would have been his immediate supervisor, Sergeant Biggs.
And then contained within this package of States Exhibit 96 involving this complaint, there's an email. Can you go ahead and read what's contained within the email that is from a Victor Dankowicz, Dankewich, to a Kevin Brown?
Yes, it says, "Hi, Kevin," and just for reference purposes, Kevin Brown would have been I don't know if he was a sergeant or a lieutenant in our training division at that time, so although it's informal references, just to give context. "Hi, Kevin, I have a guy that I need to get into a verbal judo or something similar for some people skills. He has had a couple of complaints on dealing with the public, and I need to get him into any kind of class that's out there. Any ideas? ? Thanks."
The last one, States Exhibit 97. Actually, I think it'll be easier. Let me hand it back to you. In the second page, there's a synopsis of the complaint and the result. If you would just read that synopsis into the record, please.
All right, this is a verbal counseling form. This is a verbal counseling form, and again, this is the violation that's identified as failure to read, understand, and comply with state law, which is not actually what that Employee Manual Code section states, but the synopsis says, on 04-27-12, Officer R.E. Olson, number 2817, conducted a traffic stop on a black Volkswagen Jetta for a brake light violation. Upon making contact with the driver, Officer Olson requested a driver's license, or requested the driver's license. The driver was produced a driver's license by the territory of Puerto Rico, printed in English and Spanish. Officer Olson failed to inspect the license completely and did not recognize or did not realize that license was printed in both languages. Officer Olson then requested an international driver's permit, and when the driver, Mr. Cotto, C-O-T-T-O, could not produce one, he was arrested and his vehicle impounded. Mr. Cotto filed a complaint with our department, and Sergeant J.A. Medina investigated. Through investigation, it was determined that the citations that Officer Olson issued were in fact valid, but only because the driver had lived in the state for more than 30 days without obtaining a Georgia driver's license. Officer Olson did not inquire how long Cotto had lived in this state at the time of the stop, and that fact was not taken into consideration at the time the citation was issued. In conclusion, Officer Olson issued 2 valid citations at the time of the stop, but did not ask the appropriate questions to support the citations at the time of the stop. Officer Olson has been advised to read code section 40- and this would be an OCGA, Official Code of Georgia Annotated, code section 40-5-20, and be familiar with the laws and its exceptions. I'm sorry. This topic will also be discussed in roll call as training, and that is signed by Sergeant Medina, dated 6/1/12.
Great. May I have one moment, Your Honor?
Those are all my questions. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Sergeant. I'm Amanda Clark-Palmer. How are you?
Doing well, thank you.
And I think you were kind enough to speak to me on the phone the other day about these records, correct?
We did.
Yes, thank you. So just to clear up a few things, the first complaint that we looked at, the one where Officer Olson used the F word, that was a complaint from December of 2009, correct? And I'll use the Elmo. I'm going to try to make this go a little more quickly if that's possible.
Right. Yes, it was December of 2009.
Okay. And are you aware that that's when Officer Olson had been with the DeKalb County Police Department for just over approximately a year?
No, I did not know that. I don't know when he was hired.
Okay.
I wouldn't have known at the time.
Okay. All right. Now, and that, you said that was a line level investigation, so it was not conducted by an internal affairs detective. It was done by somebody at the precinct level?
Correct.
Okay. Because y'all have levels of complaints and who's going to investigate them, right?
Correct.
And the more serious a complaint is, then it would not be investigated at the precinct level. It would be handled through internal affairs.
Correct.
Okay. Now, as part of the investigation into this one particular complaint you're talking about, you saw that there were statements provided by other officers who witnessed what happened that night, correct?
I do not know. I didn't review them for content. I just provided the...
So I don't know, let me get the exhibit number.
94.
94. Okay, and 94, I'll put it up on the just you tell me if I'm reading it correctly. First of all, Your Honor, this doesn't have a page number, but it's the statement from Sergeant Carruth, C-A-R-R-U-T-H, to Sergeant Coffin, C-O-F-F-I-N. Okay.
Yes, I'm...
Okay, so first of all, we're talking about an incident that happened at 1 in the morning, correct? According to this paperwork.
Yes.
Okay. And in this report from the other officer who was on scene, he says that the driver, the one who made the complaint, was acting extremely excited and agitated, correct?
That's what the statement indicates, yes.
That's what, I read that correctly.
Yes.
And also later on, this sergeant writes that, again, talking about Mrs. Lewis, would not stand still, and due to her agitated state, I, talking about Sergeant Caruth, took the keys from her ignition switch so that she could not jump back into the taxi and drive off, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so on the next page, page 13, it looks like it's slightly in a, well, this is a different memorandum. Now it's from Officer Cintron to Sergeant Caruth. You see that?
Yes.
And he apparently witnessed this same stop, and he wrote a statement about what he saw, correct?
Yes.
He also says the taxi driver was being irate and cursing while stating, "Why did you stop me?" Correct?
Correct.
Okay. And we have the very next page, page 14. We have another statement from, this time it's from Sergeant Barden, B-A-R-D-E-N, who apparently was also there that morning, that early morning, correct?
Correct.
He states too, the driver appeared to become excited and agitated and raised her voice in an effort to explain that she had not done anything wrong and did not deserve a ticket, correct?
Correct.
And on the next page, so page 15, this is still Sergeant Barden's statement. He says, during the entire time that I was present, Officer Olson was professional in his actions and did not exhibit any sign of emotion or reaction in response to the negative actions of the female driver. Did I read that right?
Yes.
And Officer Olson ends up just getting a letter that says, this is your written counseling that we're giving to you because we sustained the complaint in this instance.
Correct.
So then jumping forward, still in States 94, but I've jumped forward a few pages, Your Honor, to the memorandum from BP Coffin to, what's the DF? LTDF?
It's just a first and middle initials. I don't recall what their first names are. We tend to deal in last names in the police department, so.
To Wilson from Coffin.
Right, and yeah, Coffin was the sergeant, and the lieutenant would have been, so this would have just been a memo up to the next step in that chain of command.
I can't say I have it. It's the fourth page from the back. Fourth to last page.
Okay, so this is the first page of what he writes. Then there's a second page, and I'm jumping to the third page of his statement.
That's
The second
It's
to last page.
and it's the shortest. part.
correct, yeah, I'm with you.
His second to last paragraph, he says, Officer Olson did in fact use profanity, but the next sentence says, Officer Olson is an exemplary officer and works hard to project a positive image of himself and the DeKalb County Police Department. This incident is not typical of Officer Olson's conduct, correct?
Correct.
That's what it says.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so that's 2009, and then we go forward to 2010, and we have the complaint from Mr. Simmons. That's the one where he says that Officer Olson was rude to him and wouldn't explain why he was stopped, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
And that was the one where you said Officer Olson was exonerated.
Yes, that shows to be the findings.
And so that means, exonerated means that he did do what the person complained about, but he was justified in acting the way that he did.
Correct, or, I mean, that there was interaction, or, but there wasn't anything that constituted a violation of policy in the interaction.
Because some sometimes officers have to get forceful with the people that they are dealing with, particularly if they're trying to give somebody a citation or maybe arrest them. That's a situation where the citizen might get angry, correct?
Certainly.
And the officer may have to raise their voice, right?
Correct.
Maybe use some forceful language, correct?
Correct.
And so you all, in internal affairs, you get lots of complaints about officers being rude to citizens, don't you?
It's a fairly standard complaint, rudeness.
It's kind of sort of, well, it's a standard complaint, as you said, right?
Yes.
All right. So that one's exonerated. Then we go forward to 2011. So he has one complaint in 09, one complaint in 2010. I mean, it's listed as 2 in your database, but it's from the same complainant.
Correct. It appears to be a duplicate.
He gets 1 in 2011, right?
Yes.
This is the one, another one where he's alleged that he was being rude in a traffic stop, correct? So if you go back to 93, go back to states 93.
Right.
Yeah. Sorry.
That's okay.
You didn't sit down last night and memorize these records. Okay. So this is the one where you explained it was not sustained. Oh, let me this is the one in 2011 where it was
Correct.
not sustained, right?
Correct.
But this is the one that Mr. Johnson just reviewed with us, where we saw something in the file that recommended that Officer Olson needed to go get some kind of counseling or course on dealing with people, correct?
Correct.
All right, so after, and he does that, I guess, he gets the verbal counseling or whatever. I'm not sure if that's notated in the file or not.
Right. I don't know whether or not. Right. There was no disciplinary, or the corrective action wasn't in the form of a written counseling, but it was a recommendation of training.
Okay.
So whether or not that training occurred, I do not know.
Whatever. But after that, although there were more complaints, there was not another complaint where Officer Olson was rude to a citizen after 2011.
Correct. Not rudeness. No, not rudeness specifically.
We get the next complaint, we get the one in 2012 where essentially what happened is Officer Olson wrote a citation that he should not have written because he got the law wrong about when a driver's license was valid or not.
Correct.
Okay. And then we've got this one in 2014. A citizen thought he parked in the fire lane at Publix and was grocery shopping.
Correct.
And what happened with that one?
As it indicates by the P, it's a phone complaint, and in the comments, this is actually a phone call I took in the office, and I believe it says here that I think that he wished he didn't. I invited him to. Right, it says here I invited Mr. Cohen to come in and file a complaint. However, he stated he did not want to file a complaint. He just wanted to speak with one of the officer supervisors to discuss his concern, and I basically hand walked his information down to one of the supervisors at North Central Precinct and asked them to follow up with it per the citizen's request. And it was notated in the database as referred, that being referred to that precinct supervisor.
Okay. We don't know what happened after that.
I do not. No, I don't know.
And if you said it before and I missed it, I apologize. How long have you been in internal affairs?
About 9 years, about the middle of 2010 till present.
Okay, so I understand you may not know all the statistics off the top of your head, but fair to say you have kind of a general sense of how many complaints come through the internal affairs office.
Correct.
You guys get hundreds of complaints every year? Thousands?
Probably in the low hundreds. I think I didn't memorize any historical archival data or anything for today. I can tell you that currently our year-to-date stats for major cases is about, I think, 80. And I think it's 80. Yeah, 80 major cases, and I think we're at 60 1 line levels and about a similar number of phone complaints. So, but that's average anywhere, I'd say maybe on average about 125 as far as major cases is an average. Again, I can only offer up anecdotal statistics,
Okay.
right? This is small.
Okay, it's not unusual for an officer who is on the police force to have had complaints made against him.
Correct, I've had complaints lodged against me.
That's right. How many complaints have you had lodged against you?
Over my 4 years, maybe four or five, something.
Kind of comes with the territory of being a police officer and interacting with the public,
It can,
who may not appreciate being stopped by a police officer, right?
correct,
Or being issued a citation, right?
correct.
Okay. And in internal affairs, do you guys kind of get a sense of when you start to see the same officer over and over again?
Yes,
Having complaints against him or her, right?
yes,
Maybe a quote-unquote frequent flyer.
correct,
You start to get a sense of who is out there and they're getting more than the usual complaints that officers typically get, right?
correct.
And Officer Olson is not that officer. He's not a frequent flyer in internal affairs, correct?
He was not, no, he wasn't.
And you knew him professionally when he was employed with the DeKalb County Police Department, correct?
Yes,
Okay. And you got to know him a little bit because he was in the administrative office for some period of time, correct?
correct. He was the administrative officer for the North Precinct, and then when North Precinct and Central Precinct combined, he remained during that transition phase and then eventually went back to the road. But I communicated with him somewhat regularly during those times for administrative reasons, tracking down packages just like these.
And when you dealt with him and your interactions with him, how did you find him to be?
Pleasant, good guy, no problems, very professional, very responsive to work requests. I mean, just a normal good guy.
Trying to do his job as a police officer.
That was always my interactions with him, yes.
Those are all my questions, Judge.
Just, Sergeant, when you were talking about when complaints come in and some are line level complaints and they don't get investigated by the IA section, I guess I just want to make it clear for the court, just because they're investigated at the line level, does that mean they're not important?
No, all complaints are reviewed, all complaints are important, and just because they're sent to the line level doesn't mean that they're not important. I mean, one of the reasons, obviously the line level supervisors, get a little uptight whenever we send stuff because they think, why isn't IA, that's their job, why aren't they doing it? But one of the philosophies for doing the line levels is that they are in a position to, they know the officer, they know the officer's demeanor, that type of thing. Also, if they get a lot of complaints, if they start seeing a pattern, they're in a better position to deal with it, address it, either just through stopping by on calls or traffic stops to see and just kind of keep a closer eye on them. Whereas up in internal affairs, we can investigate 100 professional image complaints, but we're not in a position because we're in the office to be stopping out on traffic stops and popping in on calls and things like that. We're not on the road. So that's one of the reasons why. And also just because it's, we simply don't have the manpower to do, some of these other, sort of more straightforward investigations. So we send them to the line for those reasons.
And in that report or the investigation involving Ms. Lewis, where there was the professionalism image sustained one, where he used the profanity, not only did he use profanity, but in that one he also lied about it, didn't he?
The immediate investigators did not categorize it as that. So I mean, whether or not it was they just did not recall, or whether there was a nefarious intent to lie, I can't speak to that. But
Sure.
They did not categorize it as such.
Sure. And I understand. I guess let me ask a different question. Is it your understanding from that report that they got a statement from Officer Olsen, and in that statement he claimed he did not use profanity, and only when he was confronted with the audio did he say, well, I hear it, but I don't remember saying it?
that is what they recorded, yes.
Okay. And if a police officer has one sustained complaint for professional image, wouldn't you agree that's one too many?
Certainly, we don't want to see any violations of any kind, ideally. But again, it's, at times police work can be, contentious interactions, and so I mean, it's, officers are human. They make mistakes. They say things they shouldn't say. So, ideally, we certainly wouldn't want them to use foul language or rude language or abrasive language. But the fact of the matter is, it does happen from time to time.
And the defense pointed out in that same package from State's Exhibit 94 that a Sergeant Durden said that he felt at all times he was there, he saw Olson act in a professional manner. Do you believe, and excuse my language, that saying to someone, I am the fucking police, is professional?
No, I don't think it is.
I have no further questions.
All right, now this witness be excused.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Johnson, do you need to leave those exhibits up for your next witness, or are you going to take them?
I don't. I can move them and give them to the court reporter if you like.
Just take them for you.
Your Honor, we have some victim impact statements that we'd like to make.
Okay.
And so now's the time.
Yeah.
All right. State would first call Ms. Karen Juno.
Why don't you come to the witness stand? Okay. I don't know. I assume that there won't be questions.
Guess I'm okay.
The best you can. The best you can be.
Yes, ma'am. Well, my name is Carolyn Jumo. I'm Anthony Hill's mother. Thank you for allowing me to give this impact statement. I'm here on behalf of me and my family who has been here through this trial. March 9th, 2015 started off as a regular day. I got up, I went to work. I got a call from my daughter later that afternoon telling me that my son, Anthony Hill, was killed by a police officer. At that moment, I said, oh no, not my son, not my peaceful son, not my son who's never been in trouble with any police officer. This has been an exhausting journey to get to this day. The day to seek justice for Anthony Hill. I would like to tell you some things about Tony. And I want you to know who he was, some of the things. As a child, Tony was very peaceful. He especially loved and had compassion for older and younger children. His motto was, he believed what the world needed was love. All we need was love. He believed love solved everything. And any problem, it began with love. I actually talked to him the 3 days before he was killed, and that's what he talked about, love, peace. Tony was very active in the church. He sung on the choir. He was an acolyte. He attended church regularly with his grandfather. In school, he was on the football team, the Beta Club, chorus, ran track, and was a good student, good grades. He loved to read books all the time. And I have to go back and always say, Tony believed we need to love. We need to love. We need to love people. We need to respect people. We need to be doing the right thing. That was something he strongly believed in as a young child, and he carried that on with him. When I found out my son was being deployed to Afghanistan, I was worried. I was afraid he was going to get killed. He wasn't going to come back, because it was a decision he made on his own to go, because he wanted to serve his country. And I didn't agree with it, but I had to, because I'm the mother and I have to love him unconditionally and agree with what he wants to do. But I prayed to God that he would keep him safe. And when he came back, I was relieved. I said, now I can breathe. My son came back alive. He is here now. But he didn't come back unscathed. He started having medical problems. And he did try to find help and sought help for his medical problems. In the Air Force, before he was medically retired with honors, they had to find the right medication. So he was told if he had any side effects to stop taking it. And that's what he did. And believe it or not, his next appointment was that following Wednesday for the issues that he was having. He had stopped taking the medication because of his side effects. Jaw locking, heart pounding, tongue swelling. My son has never had a breakdown on any episode. This was the first. March 9th, 2015, will be a day that I will never forget. It will always be a part of me. On that day, no one was expecting that he would walk around unclothed in the complex and asking for help. I want you to know why I believe my son ran towards the officer. As growing up, my father talked to my siblings, myself, and my children. He always told us at a young age, if you're ever in trouble, run to the police. And be sensible. And that's why my son had that tattoo on his chest. Be sensible. We don't run to trouble. We run for help. The decision has really stressed me of what happened. The defense has stressed that it was 6 or 7 seconds. The decision Robert Olsen made that day, and those few seconds changed my life forever. It was the worst day of my life because of those decisions. I had to bury my youngest child. Knowing that this shouldn't have happened. I know Mr. Olson did not wake up that day and said, I'm going to go shoot Anthony Hill. I do know that. But because of those decisions that he made to use lethal force instead of a different type of force that he had, I do not have my son. I had to bury my youngest child, my only son. Because he chose to use deadly force, that is the reason we're here. And this is what this is all about, the consequences of that decision. Because of Mr. Olsen's actions, Tony won't get to see his sister get married. He would never get to be an uncle. I will also never get to see my son get married or have any grandkids from him to carry on his last name. I won't even know if he could have accomplished his dreams to be a musician. He loved to sing, beautiful voice. Your Honor, the jury may have found Mr. Robert Olsen not guilty of murder, but he still killed my son. He has never taken responsibility for taking my son's life. He's never just said, "I'm sorry." For killing Tony. Mr. Olsen could have taken a plea for 15 years before the trial. I was okay with that sentencing at the time. Now that my family and I had endured all the photos and hear all the testimonies of the trial, I would ask you to sentence him to the maximum sentence for the charges for which the jury found him guilty. Thank you.
Your Honor, the next impact statement will be from Anthony's sister, Tamara.
Can you say her name again, please?
Tamara Jumo.
Thank you. Before you start talking, I know there's different variations of how your first name can be spelled. Can you just spell it for me?
Oh, sure. Tamara.
Thank you.
So, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for letting me speak as well. My name is Tamara Jumo, and I am Anthony Hill's sister. I know him as Tony. That's what I've called him all my life. So, March 9th was the worst day of my life. I got a phone call in the late afternoon from my brother's girlfriend, Bridget, that Tony had been shot and killed by a police officer. The then officer, Robert Olsen. My world came crumbling down. Tony was my younger brother, my only brother. And it was just like the worst thing you can think of happened to me and my family. And I would have never thought that would ever happen to Tony. Tony was a good brother. I loved my brother. He was just a really loving person. He loved people, he loved life, he He loved music. He was very passionate about that. He was an amazing singer. He just loved life. He was just that person. And to find out that day that happened to him was just unimaginable. That was probably the hardest thing to deal with. But then I had to turn around and deal with the second hardest thing, which was calling my own mother to tell her her son was dead. And it was really hard to do. He was a good guy. He never really got in trouble. But I just want you to know Tony was a good guy. He was one of a kind. And it's been a lot on this entire journey of going through this entire process. It's something I would not wish on anybody. I don't care who you are. It's a rough journey. It's hard watching my mother go through this. I mean, I was very collected until I saw her sitting here. It's hard. You don't want your mother of all people to go through this type of pain and not be able to do anything to help. It's been hard for my family going through this. It's just a lot. It's a lot. And like my mother said, no one thinks that Robert Olsen woke up and said, I'm just going to kill Anthony or kill Tony. I would never want to assume anybody would have that type of train of thought. But nevertheless, he did kill Tony. And that is why, as my mom said, we're here. We're going through this whole process because of that decision. So like my mom, I do ask today that you at least give him the maximum sentence for the charges he was found guilty of. And that's all. Thank you.
One more, Your Honor. Anthony Hill Sr., call it, of Anthony Hill.
Hello, everyone. Hello, y'all. Excuse me. My name is Anthony Hill. I'm 57 years old, like Robert Olsen. Anthony is my youngest of two sons. James is my oldest. He lives in California. He's not here. I'm representing James, my family in Chicago, LA, Texas. I remember vividly that night when I received that phone call from my sister. And I was on my way to work, getting prepared for work. And she called me and she told me, Tony, I need you to come here now. She lives about 5 miles away from me in Chicago. And I couldn't understand why she wanted me to come down there at 11 o'clock at night, knowing that I had to go to work. So we kind of fussed a bit, and I eventually made my way down there. When I walked in the door, I noticed that everybody was there, you know. Brother-in-law, nieces, nephews. And you know, everybody was there except my mom. She was suffering from Alzheimer's. So, you know, I had pretty much prepared myself for what I thought my sister was about to say. You know, I thought she was going to tell me Mom had passed, you know. So, you know, I'm ready for it. That's not what my sister said. You know, she told me that little Tony's dead. Yeah, I don't know what to tell you, you know what I mean? You go through, like in that moment, I went through so many emotions at that time. Anger, you know, being the number one, I won't lie. Anger being the number one. Because at that time, you know, I'm a dad. Mr. Olson's a dad. And I thought the same thing, and I'm quite sure Mr. Olsen would have thought. Had something like that happened to his child. You go through, you're mad, you're hurt, you're upset, and it's like you don't know what to think, what to do, you know, and you feel helpless because you're his dad. And your job is supposed to be to protect him. And you feel like you failed at that job. Because he's not here. And I don't want to sound, you know, as though I'm gonna be like angry and bitter, which I am, but I don't want to sound like, you know, I mean any malice towards Mr. Olsen in any way. But I know how he would have felt had that been his child, because it was mine, and it was my child. And you know, it's a lot has transpired since then and now. There's a lot that I want to say and can't say it because I don't know how to say it. And a lot has transpired in the 4.5 years. You know, your child's not here. You have to be drugged through a trial where you just once, I'm looking at the man. I'm being a man. I'm looking at a man. And just once I wanted that man to just make eye contact with me. Just, he don't have to say anything, but just your eyes can tell whether or not, listen, I'm sorry, nothing. I stood out in that passageway many a day, just hoping, just once, that I can get just a little bit of eye contact. Nothing. You don't have to say anything to me. Not one time will he look my way? Not just a glance, anything, just I want to look, just to see if maybe, just maybe, you know. And I thought, okay, well, you got an opportunity to take the stand and defend yourself. Instead, you choose not to. I understand. I get the legal part of it. I get the fact that you have attorneys that's telling you not to for obvious reasons. But this is your life. You have a child. My understanding is he has a child too. Listen, I wish no ill upon his child because of the mere fact I know how he has to feel right now, facing what he's facing. That doesn't excuse the fact that he did what he did. Even if he's behind bars, his child can still come and see him. I don't know if, never been in jail. I don't know. I mean, his child may be able to hug him. I don't know. But that's more than Carolyn and I can do with ours. We will never be able to see Tony again. We'll never be able to speak with Tony again. We'll never be able to hug Tony again. We'll never be able to say, I love you to Tony again. We'll never be able to do any of these things. At least he has the opportunity to do that. We do not have that opportunity. It was taken away from us. All I am asking, all any of us is asking, is that he be held accountable to the fullest extent for what he has done. That's it. Nothing else. No more, no less. The fullest extent of what he has done. It's semantics, you know, with, you know, whether it was felony murder, whether it was this, whether it was that, whether it was this. He knows in his heart what he did. He knows, it was two people that was involved. It was Tony and it was Robert Olsen. He knows in his heart what he did. And if he looks in that mirror at himself, I don't care what an attorney says, I don't care what anybody else says, if he looks himself in that mirror and he can live with himself, knowing that what he did was wrong, that's something he has to face on his own. Nothing I can do. It's irrelevant what my heart may say, what my mind may say. None of that has any relevance here today. The only thing that matters, Your Honor, is what you do here in this courtroom today. We ask that it just simply be the right thing. You know, that's it. That's it. I don't really know what else to say. I want to say a lot more, but I really, you know, it's time, Your Honor. It's just time to let it go and just move forward. You know, so thank you.
Thank you.
Your Honor, the state doesn't have any further evidence to present at this time.
I'm going to take a brief break and take a brief and break.
Yes, sir. Here we go.
somebody at least on each side to come up.
How much in your way am I going to be if I stand where that lady is kneeling? Because I know you're trying to get his wife. Am I going to be in the way if I stand where she's kneeling right beside him? Okay.
ladies and gentlemen.
So Mr. Johnson and Mr. Samuel, you guys gave arguments on merger as to counts 5 and 6. And upon some further review, I found a case that is on point, which is Hannah v. State, H v. State, 280 Georgia Appeals 230. It's a 2006 case. And in that, and based off of the appellate court's decision, in that case, count 5 actually will merge with count 6. Specifically, what I will highlight is there was a defendant who was convicted of serious injury by a vehicle, and through that, the driving under the influence was the predicate. And there the court explained that the single instance of Hannah's driving under the influence was used up in proving that he caused a serious injury by a vehicle. Thus, that instance could not be used again for a separate DUI conviction because the DUI, the predicate act underlying the serious injury by vehicle, constituted a lesser included crime of the serious injury by vehicle pursuant to that statute, and that the statute of OCGA 16-1-7 subsection A bars conviction of and punishment of both offenses. And after looking again at the indictment, after we went through the academic colloquies, it is the same as one false statement that was made. There's not two separate false statements. So for the purposes of sentencing, count 5 will merge into count 6. And I stand corrected to what I previously stated, and I'm overturning myself in the fact that the maximum sentence now, as I have interpreted the law based off of this appellate law, is 30 years.
Yes, Judge. And the state understands the court's ruling. We still object from our prior argument. And just so I'm clear as well, for sentencing purposes, you'll be sentencing on count 6, but not on count 5?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Your objection is noted. All right. I believe the state has indicated they do not have any other witnesses to the defense ready to proceed.
Yes, we are, Your Honor. Just to give the court a little roadmap of what we're going to do, I have 4 character witnesses I'd like to present to the court. And then I believe Mr. Olson has a statement he'd like to make, and then we'll be done and ready to move to argument. So I'll first call Mr. Wayne Kidd. Your Honor, for all the names that I'm going to read off, I told the court reporter I would email him the spelling of everybody. Okay. So do I need to swear him in, or I don't think? Do you care if he's sworn in?
Oh,
You want him to be?
he's a witness.
Okay. Well, we didn't. I don't think we swore anybody else in, but will you raise your right hand?
Sergeant Grandier, but not the victim.
Okay.
Statements. You can have a seat, and the lieutenant's going to swear.
Okay.
Raise your right hand. Do solemnly swear or affirm testimony about the is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
All right, state your name for the record.
Name is Wayne Kidd, K-I-D-D, like the captain, Captain Kidd.
Okay. Can you just give us 2 or 3 sentences, and please tell the court just a little bit about yourself, your background.
I'm 77 years old, happily married after 55, which is a heck of an accomplishment. I spent 5 years in the service. I'm a decorated combat infantry officer over 2 tours. I spent 31 years in the needlework industry, knit and crochet, cross stitch, that type, working for manufacturers, selling to retailers like Walmart or Hobby Lobby, Michaels. Retired very, very early 50s. And just trying to take care of myself and my wife, actually. That's really where I spend my time. Since I did retire, community-wise, I'm not really much into the community. Everybody does their thing. I served as a president of my HOA, served on several of their committees. I was one of 4 veterans who formed the Johns Creek Veterans Association. I was one of 5 veterans who built the 4-acre Veterans Memorial Walk in Johns Creek, and I was a major fundraiser for that, getting about a little over $500,000. And other than that, I just try to take care of my wife and I, traveling a bit, that's all.
All right, and can you tell the court how you know Chip Olson and how long you've known him?
Well, I've known Chip for approximately 12 years. Could be 13, could be 11. Actually, I had to ask my wife. I couldn't come up with an answer. And how I know him, I was putting in about 900 hours building a 14-station fitness trail for the HOA, and working down at the park one day by myself, and Chip walked in. He says, "You need some help." Well, very rarely do people volunteer when it's hard labor. And I said, "Of course." And 300 hours later, he and I had become friends. And we're social friends, which means the wives know each other. We've had dinner together, his house, my house, etc. That's how we know each other.
Okay. And have known each other, you said, for somewhere between 11 to 13 years?
Yes.
Okay. And in that time period, can you tell the court, give us maybe 3 or 4 adjectives about what kind of person Chip is?
I would say trustworthy. I'd say extremely loyal, helpful. He believes in volunteering. He's asked me to he's offered to volunteer at other projects that I have. Those are the 3 adjectives.
Okay.
Quite frankly.
Can you give us a for example or an anecdote or something that you have seen in your friendship with Chip that leads you to describe him that way?
No one does the physical labor. Nobody does the physical labor that was required to build that fitness trail without being extremely dependable and loyal. He didn't have to do it. I didn't pay him anything. And that's why I said the 3 adjectives. I find him beyond that, while I was a lousy husband, a lousy father to 3 children, Chip is by far one of the best dads I've ever seen. Certainly better than my father.
And you're basing that on things that you've seen with him and his son?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we live in the same area, so I bumped into him. Every time I saw Chip, I saw Max, his son, 10 years old. They have a relationship I wish I had with my boys.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Your Honor. Those are all my questions.
Yes. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
And you are the individual who was able to take custody of all of Robert Olson's weapons, right?
Yes.
In fact, he had 13, didn't he?
You have the record. It's either 12 or 13.
Sure. And I have the affidavit that you completed. Is that
correct?
You're the one that did that?
The bank notary and me.
Great. And so do you have any idea why he had 12 to 13 weapons, rifles, AR-15, handguns, all that?
Well, it's I know an awful lot of veterans. I know a lot of guys. My father had 3 or 4 hunting rifles. I know one of my best friends has probably more or even more of that. Some people are just into that. I'm not, but some people are.
And you mentioned the word trustworthy to describe your friend. As a former military man, and first, thank you for your service.
It was a hoot. You're welcome.
I've been there. You believe oaths are important, don't you?
Well, in our lifetime, we all take oaths, so I suspect the answer is yes.
And telling the truth is important, isn't it?
It is.
Yet, although you find him trustworthy, a jury of 12 people found your friend guilty of lying to cover up the death of a 26-year-old man
How do you reconcile that with saying he's trustworthy?
Well, first, I don't try to just reconcile it in that format. I'm not a prosecuting attorney. I'm not a lawyer. I don't look at it that way. I look at it as it affects me, period.
So you're saying in your personal times with Mr. Olson, you found him to be trustworthy, but how he was on the road as a patrol officer, you can't speak to, can you?
Well, first, I didn't say it that way, but I did find him trustworthy in my time, and how he acted on the road, I'll leave to his supervisors and his efficiency reports. I can't state with any clarity or any judgment on that.
Were you aware that in a traffic stop of a woman who was operating a taxi, he used profanity and then denied using that profanity? Were you aware of that?
No. Why would I be?
That's right.
Were you finished?
Oh, yes, I have no further questions.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Kidd. Step down.
Thanks, Your Honor.
Your Honor, we call Nick Robichaux.
It's in my email, I promise.
Raise your right hand. Do solemnly swear or affirm the testimony about to give the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes, I do.
Right, just state your name for the record.
My name is Nicholas Robichaux. It's spelled Robichaux.
Sir, where did you work from 2003 until 2015?
I worked at the DeKalb County Police Department.
Okay. Are you currently in law enforcement now?
Yes.
Okay, but not with DeKalb?
No.
All right. And while you were with the DeKalb County Police Department, can you tell us what departments you worked, divisions you worked in within the department?
Sure. So I was in patrol like everyone else for about 5 years. After that, I became a detective. Worked on a violent crime task force and a couple of things. I was on the SWAT team and tactical response team. Then I got selected to go to the internal affairs unit, and I was a detective there for about 3 years.
Okay. And I think we've already heard, the court's already heard today what internal affairs does, so I'm not going to make you go through that. But in working at the DeKalb County Police Department, did you come to know Chip Olson?
I did.
Okay. And how would you characterize your relationship with Mr. Olson? Is it professional? Were you drinking buddies? What was the relationship?
Just strictly professional. We never hung out off duty or anything, but I saw him a lot, worked with him several times. We're in a lot of trainings together, things like that.
Okay. And in the time that you got to know him when you were working at the DeKalb County Police Department, did you feel that you got to know him enough to form an opinion of his character?
I did.
All right. And so can you, just like I asked Mr. Kidd, can you tell the court, give us, a few adjectives of how you would describe Chip Olson as a person?
Chip was one of the most genuinely kind people I knew. He was always very honest and forthright with me. I never knew him to be anything different than that. He's a very intellectual person, very thoughtful, and very non-judgmental. He was friends with everyone. He's one of those kind of people. He was just a genuine person, someone I wanted to be around.
Okay, how about his temperament? What did you observe about his temperament?
I've never seen him be anything other than calm. I didn't work patrol with him. We were at different precincts, but I've never seen him be angry or even raise his voice or anything like that. It's just always been kind of calm and.
Okay, and how about how he? I think you touched on this a little bit, but how he treated other people. Did you have a chance to observe him interacting with other people?
Yeah, he was like I said before, he's very non-judgmental. He just he was friends with, I wouldn't say everyone at the police. No one's friends with everyone, but he was one of those people that got along with everyone. And he just yeah. I never saw him have any. He was the type of officer and person really that in a stressful or obviously police officers go through stressful situations. Some police officers unfortunately will escalate those situations. Some will try and diffuse it. Chip was always one of the people that that shied away from the conflict and would try and diffuse the situations. He's a very good talker. He can talk to people, and he's got that gift about him. Some officers may just use their strength or something like that to, it's just, we're people, right? That's how I know. He was one of the people who would, he talked to everybody, even people he arrested.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so did you also get to see and observe Chip after the shooting of Anthony Hill, after March 9th, 2015?
Yeah.
Okay. And what was your observations about his demeanor with regards to that incident?
I mean, it was just, I guess, withdrawn maybe. I was in internal affairs at the time, so obviously my professional job was to conduct an investigation, which is what we did. But he was, I hate to say he was a different person, but he felt terrible for what happened. Everyone knows what happened, and that can never change. But mentally, it affected him. I think he was more withdrawn. It affected him. No one wants to take anyone else's life. And as a couple people have said before, no officer wakes up with the intent to do that. It's just police officers get in situations that are very quick, that happen very quick, and have to make decisions extremely fast. And the public, they expect them to make the correct decision 100% of the time. That's impossible. And Chip, he made the decision he did, and I'm not here to give my opinion on it. I just he took he's carrying a mental burden with him.
Okay.
I guess.
And can you give us an estimate of when the last time, before this trial and being in court here, when do you think is the last time that you had some interaction with Mr. Olson?
It was before I left the police department. I left in 2015.
Okay.
Somewhere in that range, late 2015 maybe.
And did Mr. Olson call you up and ask you to come be a character witness, or did you reach out to him?
No, I reached out to him after the trial.
And volunteered to come be here today?
I did. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I'll pass the witness.
Good afternoon, sir.
Afternoon.
So currently, you're not a DeKalb police officer?
No,
though,
sir,
right?
I'm not.
Okay. So if I understand correctly, you never saw the defendant when he was out on patrol. Is that right?
Not that I recall. I had worked a few details in North Precinct, but I don't recall interacting with him on a street level.
Okay. So like if he was going on his regular patrol and making, routine traffic stops, things of that nature, those weren't the kind of things you observed?
No.
Okay. So any, incidents that happened between the defendant and a citizen that went up to being an IA complaint, you weren't aware of, were you?
No, I wasn't.
And in fact, Olson didn't talk to you about it, did he?
If he did, I don't recall.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you said that he was always honest and forthright with you. If I were to tell you that he was found guilty in this courtroom of lying, does that surprise you?
It does. And I understand, you know. I don't know what happened back in the jury room, and I didn't watch the trial, but maybe for 30 minutes or so. I don't live in the state anymore, so that wasn't, that's not his character and who I know him to be.
In fact, sometimes we think we know people and we really don't, do we?
Well, I mean, I guess you never really fully know anyone. I think that can be said for anyone. Yeah.
Including the defendant, right?
Well, sure. Like I said, I don't feel like, you know, I didn't hang out with him off duty, as I said before. So, but it's hard to know anyone's complete character.
Thank you. That's all the questions.
Anything else, Mr.
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you.
I'm going to ask Mr. Michael Mann to come up.
Raise your right hand. Do solemnly swear or affirm testimony about to give the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
State your name for the record.
Hi, my name is Michael Mann. Last name is M-A-N-N.
Okay. And sir, can you give the court a few sentences and tell the judge about who you are and your background?
Yes, ma'am. I'm currently a special agent with the United States Army Counterintelligence. I am the senior representative at the National Joint Terrorism Task Force with the FBI. I'm also a prior municipal law enforcement officer.
Okay. And how long have you been in law enforcement total?
Between the federal government and local law enforcement, approximately 24 years.
Okay. So now will you please tell the court how you got to know Chip Olson and how long you've known him?
Yes. The nature of my business, I move around quite a bit. 2010, the Army brought me and my family to Atlanta, Georgia, where I was assigned to the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force. Probably late 2010, once we knew the area, we ended up buying a house that was almost directly across the street from Mr. Olson and his family.
And then did you become friends with them?
So over the next 4 years that I was assigned in Georgia, we got to know each other quite well, and we've stayed in touch since then. One of the first things that kind of struck me about Chip was I thought to myself, he's a little old to be getting into law enforcement, but that kind of showed me the type of man that he was. Law enforcement's a difficult profession. So although I couldn't speak with Chip very often about what I did because of the nature, I did try to be that friend to him, that outlet, so to speak. Out of courtesy, because I couldn't reciprocate what I was doing, I didn't really ask him details about what he was into. He would speak a lot about kind of his aspirations in the job.
I'm sorry, you said he did or did not speak?
He did.
Okay.
I'm trying to put it in context. Even though he was a late entry into law enforcement, he always had the desire to do something new, something better, whether it was through training. I think he talked one time about learning more about technology that could help, the department do their jobs better. He talked about eventually getting promoted. I believe he was a field training officer, but he talked about wanting to lead and mentor other officers.
So I just tried to be that friend. We had some common background.
May I interrupt
Yes.
you and ask you to give the judge a little more sense? You said you got to be friends with the Olsons. What are we talking about? Like, did you all socialize? Did they come to your house?
So, absolutely. For the brief period we were there, we socialized. There were many nights where we sat on each other's back porch, just kind of talking about life in general. He and Kathy became good friends.
Have you all kept in touch even since
Well, I made mention before, my profession takes me around the world, and we tend to move a lot. My family's not the type that we have friends everywhere. I mean, we may have some acquaintances here and there, but the friends that we do make, we usually keep for a lifetime. That was the type of bond that we had with Chip and Kathy. Our kids played together. They grew up together for 4 years. In fact, it was one of the hardest days of my life when Kathy told us what had happened. No law enforcement officer wants to. Sorry. No, for the Hill family, for the Olson family, so anyway, to answer your question, we have maintained contact, intermittent. After we left Atlanta, we spent a number of years overseas and really didn't get to see him much. But I would still consider them family friends.
Okay. And so same questions that I asked the other two witnesses. Can you tell the judge what type of person you know Chip to be?
Yes, ma'am. Like I said, we move around a lot. The friends we make for life. If I had any questions about Chip's character, I wouldn't be sitting here today. I'm not going to try to get into his head, but as a law enforcement officer, we're constantly faced with those types of decisions. He's one of the most low-key people that I've ever known. His demeanor, whether it's been in public or private, is consistent. He's not the type of person that ever thinks about himself first. I think I recall a story. He worked on his own time to build a desk or something for the precinct or one of the municipal areas. That was the type of person he is.
Okay. All right. And is that what you wanted to share with the court today?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Judge.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yes, sir.
And you're here as a friend of the defendants, not in your official capacity in any way,
That's
correct?
correct.
Okay.
It's in my personal capacity.
And it's been at least about 5 years since you've lived in this area, correct?
Correct.
And so it's been 5 years since you've seen him?
We may have seen them once or twice since we've, I think we came back from Europe one time. They may have seen it. We may have seen them on vacation.
Okay.
I don't recall.
And, you know, you talked about being a law enforcement officer and things that law enforcement officers are faced with, difficult situations, difficult decisions.
Yes, sir.
Is it ever okay to lie when you're a law enforcement officer?
No.
And you are aware that your friend was found guilty of 2 counts for lying to cover up what he did?
I'm aware of the verdict, yes, sir.
And are you also aware that in the past, while it may have been a minor traffic act incident, he used profanity with a citizen and then lied about it? Are you aware of that?
Based on the testimony earlier today, yes.
Okay, so you heard that.
Yes.
And you didn't know anything about that, did you?
No, sir.
And you didn't know anything about his lying to Officer Anderson on the scene of the crime? You didn't know anything about that, did you?
No, sir.
Okay, I don't have any further questions.
I don't have any other questions, Judge. Your Honor, Miss Kathy Olson, I'm going to call her to the stand, and she's actually written out something that she wants to read to the court. So. Okay, all right, go ahead.
Am I standing up?
You have to go up there. Let's do it up there.
Raise your right hand. Do solemnly swear or affirm testimony about to give the truth and all try nothing but the truth. All right, state your name for the record.
My name is Catherine, Katherine Olsen, Olsen.
Okay, and do you have something written that you'd like to read to the court?
I do.
Go ahead.
Thank you for allowing me to present to you the person I know as Chip Olson, not the person that has been portrayed by others. A few months before we got married, I watched him break down for the first time. His Dalmatian, Huey, who he had had from a puppy, had to be euthanized due to tumors in his stomach. Huey was with Chip during his father's cancer and death and during his divorce from his first wife. That dog had been his lifeline, and his loss devastated Chip for months, if not years. He has always bonded tightly to the dogs we've had over the years. The two of us fostered dogs for a local rescue group, but had to stop because Chip would get too attached to the ones that we took in. We currently have 2 rescue dogs, one of whom was a foster fail during the time we volunteered with rescue, who Chip loves beyond measure. He has passed not only his love of dogs and other animals to our son, also to our son. Not only does he love animals, but all things outdoors and nature related. Early in our relationship, we often tent camped in the North Georgia mountains. We hiked, and Chip taught me how to mountain bike so we could explore the woods and get some exercise. We live in a neighborhood with lots of trees and wood-like properties, and many times I find Chip with his morning coffee, sitting outside, watching the animals and listening to the sounds around him. Spending time outside helps to put him at peace when he is troubled. After we married, I watched him struggle to find a job and career that fulfilled him. He wanted to do something meaningful, challenging, and overall, he wanted to be excited about going to work. When he told me that he was applying to become a police officer, I certainly was hesitant. I knew nothing about what being a police officer entailed and had no idea what to expect. However, he was determined, and I knew right away, after he started the academy, he had made the right choice. 5 days a week for 6 months, he would come home from a long day of classes, instruction, and physical exercise and study for the next day or exam. It certainly isn't something that every 45-year-old is cut out to do. Many of our family members came to Atlanta to celebrate his graduation, as they were and are extremely proud of what he accomplished. One aspect of being with DeKalb Police that I didn't know right away is that officers ride alone. They don't have partners like they do on TV and in the movies. This made me even more concerned for his safety. Each and every day when he left for work, I knew that he could be put in situations with people looking to hurt him just because he was a police officer. He often worked accidents on busy roads and highways and all it would take is for one distracted driver, and he could have been seriously injured or killed. There are any number of scenarios in which his life would be threatened, and I had to trust and hope that these scenarios never came to pass. Morning watch, which most people would know as the night shift, took a serious physical toll on him. Sleeping during the day was difficult with 2 dogs at home. He struggled to find quality time to spend with me and our son, and he was often just too tired. I didn't like being home alone at night with our son, who was still a baby. Eventually, Chip was assigned to day watch. I would like to highlight one particular event to illustrate his dedication to his job and how he felt about his duty. This was the Snowmageddon of 2014. He was working that day and would have normally ended his shift just as the storm hit Atlanta. I was able to get home with our son, but Chip didn't make it home until close to midnight. Our neighbor had to pick him up down at the fire station because the police car wouldn't make it up the hill. The next day, the roads were closed and covered in snow and ice. He didn't even consider calling in absent.